Hey everybody, I'm Linda Bennett, your spiritual counselor and psychic host for Metaphysically Speaking. You can find us on metaspeak.com on the web, and all the other places like Facebook that you want to tune into, you will find us there. Also, if you're interested in a phone appointment, you can call my office at 727-736-4567 and somebody will get back to you about scheduling. All right, we have decided, since I am not a computer expert, but all of my people who are computer experts say that an hour show is too long. So we're going to try doing half-hour segments. So we're going to do 2 half-hour segments based upon what we're talking about today, spring and Easter and the origins and the different countries involved, and of course Jesus and the resurrection. Then we're going to go to the second set of 2 half-hour shows, and they are going to be talking about meditation, the chakras, what are they? I have a wonderful graphic to show you. And then we're going to be talking about regressions and rebirthings and clearing up some of the misinformation that's out there. So hopefully you'll like this half-hour segment situation. Please let us know on our Facebook page what you like. Also, you can find there some older shows, some current shows this past year or two, also some of my radio shows, and there's lots of information. So you want Linda at metaspeak.com. Linda at metaspeak.com. This is my producer. This is my videographer and director, and we have audience members. And down here, can they see Gracie? Can they see Gracie?
Yes.
This is Princess Gracious Gracie. I named her Princess because she has this little tiara at the forehead. And I think it was Krista or Kristen suggested that Gracie would be better behaved, although doesn't she look like the model of Pussycathood? Yes, you do, honey. That perhaps Gracie would be much happier if she had her own segment. Well, I'm actually giving her own segment, but I'll be doing the talking, and it's going to be called Gracie's Kitty Corner, and I'll be giving you information that's important about your cats and dogs. Okay, first of all, and you can kind of figure out, you know, when we're doing this, which is like April. No, we're still in March. Okay. On the 20th of March, we had the new moon, and that is the spring equinox, and it was also the solar eclipse. Now, eclipses are extra intensity. Usually there are 2 sets. Sometimes there are 3 in a 13-month period. But the first one was Aries, and that deals with, in the positive aspect, a great deal of leadership, a great deal of feeling your importance in life and perhaps the role you have to play in life coming to place for you. Negative aspect, Aries people can be bullies. You do this, you do that, you do this, you do that, and I'll just sit here and wait for all the results. Not a good idea. So if you have that as a problem, I suggest you fix it and do more of a leadership role and a participatory role. And self-discovery. I mean, why are we here on the planet? We're here to be better souls. How do you become a better soul? Figuring out who you are. The second part, because they come in solar and lunar, although they can start with lunar, she's not eating anything that's important, is she? All of a sudden the tablecloth, you know the old trick where they take the tablecloth and pull it out and all the plates stay in place? I don't think that's going to work today. The second part of it is April 4th, and that's the full moon lunar eclipse. And that is in Aries, Pisces. It moves into Pisces. No, it doesn't. It moves into Libra. So Aries and Libra are partners, 12 signs, 6 partners. Aries is full of leadership or arrogance. Libra is either full of calmness, peace, and seeking justice, or laziness, never making a decision, sitting around watching the world go by. So if you have any of these aspects that are not positive in your life, this is your opportunity to fix them. If you don't, you can observe people you love and care about in your life, and you can say, I've observed this about you. I'm not criticizing, but we are in between the eclipses, and this is a really powerful time. Eclipses are extra hard, extra difficult with thick energy. And if you can overcome a problem in an eclipse pattern, then you are going to be set for quite some time. We always get tested throughout our lives. Haven't you said to yourself, didn't I have this problem 10 years ago? Yeah, you probably did. But we always get tested 3 times for important karmic situations. So that's just to remember. The next set, I believe, comes in October, and we'll be checking it then. Now today, Gracie, please. You know, she was sitting here like a little lady before we started. Now, of course, she's underneath the tablecloth. Okay, we're going to be talking about Easter. You're going to be saying to yourself, what is she doing with this stupid stuffed rabbit and this little cardinal down there? Well, this is also an angel that has a little lamb and beautiful flowers, and she represents the spring. This is a little garden fairy, and of course, what comes up but flowers, and the blossoms are coming out on the tree. And I love my orchids, and these are little Easter eggs that somebody gave me. And because Easter to Christians represents the time of Jesus' resurrection, we have Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. This, by the way, sits on my dining room credenza year-round. Alrighty, let's talk about Easter. And it comes from the original goddess, whose name Esoter or Ostera, and that's the early Anglo-Saxon translation. Remember, with ancient languages, we can't even quite pronounce them. Nobody's around to teach us. So these are the best pronunciations. If you want to look it up, it's E-O-S-T-R-E or Ostara, O-S-T-A-R-A. And she was the spring goddess. She was the goddess of early births. She was the goddess of the animals in the forest. She was the goddess of farm animals when farming came back. And she was also the goddess of rebirth, so that you'd have a new opportunity in spring, because in the winter time you were resting and reviewing your life and counting the seeds that you were going to be planting in the spring and figuring out where your life was going to go and what crops you were going to be planting, what flowers, how much you're going to be spending on herbs, etc. So she was the goddess of fertility, and also it was very auspicious if you had a child born in, say, the end of March or April, May, or June. Why? Because they had almost a full year to recover their strengths and gather up who they are and decide if they're going to stay on the planet. What do you mean, stay on the planet? We're going to cover that in the regression and the rebirthing situation. But remember, not all children live to be 100 years old. So she is the one who is blessing all of the things that are happening in the spring. Now we have the painted Easter eggs, which are actually candles, but I never use candles. I never light flames in my house. I do not have a fireplace. But I've had enough situations here that nothing gets lit in this house except incense. Germans are the ones who started painting the eggs. Obviously, it came from so long ago that people don't even remember how it started or what made them do it. But Germany has kind of a lot of bleak days, especially in the winter and early spring and the fall. So maybe they did that as a way of cheering themselves up and making things prettier around the house, because very oftentimes, right on through April and maybe early May, Germany can have snow. So it's not a bad idea to perk yourself up to paint your eggs. It's also a nice family thing to do. Sit around with the kids and be painting your eggs. And it was also a call to life, because pretty eggs theoretically would make pretty birds or chickens or whatever you were going to be raising. The Celts hunted for eggs, but they did it this way. They found each nest that they could find, and they took out one egg very carefully, protected it, went to another nest, took out one egg. If there was only one egg, they did not remove the egg. And so however many they gathered, they brought them back to the village, and they identified them as best they could, because they knew a robin's egg, which robin's egg blue. They knew all the different types of eggs, and they knew all the different types of eggs. And so what they did was try to incubate them themselves. And when they did, and believe me, they had many cases where they did incubate them, they kept them near a fire, wrapped up in hay and soft things like lamb's wool. And oftentimes they did raise the chicks from whatever bird species it was. and they were considered the auspicious animals, the auspicious birds. And the more each family was able to raise, the more luck they were considered to be having. So then what they did was, when the babies were fledging, which means they're getting ready to fly off, they would sort of take them outside and help them learn how to walk around and learn how to be chickens or whatever, grouse, ducks. And then when it was time, they let them loose. And they always painted little markings on them so they'd know who they were from, what family raised them. And the hope was that they would return throughout the season, or maybe even for the winter, to nest, and that would be a circle of life for them. I think that's a really neat idea. It's a lot of work. You can't let that egg get cold for a second, or it's history. So the idea of spring is the rebirthing, the regeneration, and the re-opportunizing of your life. And that means that if you've made a mess of things, and many of us have made mistakes, it's your opportunity to think it out carefully, maybe counsel with the priest or priestess of the village, and figure out how you can make things better. Also, it's a time of making amends to people, the new fresh start, the new fresh spring. That doesn't mean you're not going to get a snowstorm here and there, but nevertheless, it's spring. Things are beginning to grow. So you would counsel with the spiritual teacher of the community, and you would find out who you maybe had offended, how you had offended that person, and what you can do to fix it. Sometimes you can't fix something. Maybe you took the life of a family member, somebody else's family or your own. It was your responsibility to go back to that family and the people most closely associated with that family member and say, what can I do? Now, if they say go kill yourself, that's not an option, although in some tribes it was considered honor if you did what the family asked. So you needed to be really careful who you asked how you could make amends, because very often you would not like the end result. So you would do something. Maybe you would work on their farm for the season. Maybe you would work with somebody who had been injured over the winter time, and you would help them out, and you'd get food for them, and you'd help them bathe, and whatever the family wanted is what you did if you wanted to make amends. And if the family truly thought that you made amends, then they would give you forgiveness. And that was considered wiped off your soul, out of your karma, and that would be part of your fresh start. But in part of that fresh start, you can't say, well, this is taken care of. You have to say, I'm not going to make that mistake again. Unless it's in a war situation, and then things are generally called equal, because they probably killed somebody from your family equal. But if you were a really special person, you go to the family and say, look, it happened in war. I'm not happy. I don't like war. I don't like combat. But can I do something for you anyway? That was considered an elevated perspective. That was considered, oh, possibly you could be chief or chiefess of this community. You could be a leader. And remember, people don't know each other today. I was just saying to friends of mine, look, every time you see a news item, instead of people looking at the camera, they're down here like this, looking at their phones and typing out and texting. They're missing life. But in a small community, they all knew each other. They all knew who belonged to whom, who had faults, who had assets and liabilities, and what they were. And they knew that you knew what they were all about. So everybody knew what the story really was about your life. And if you were born to the chief or the chiefess or the priest or priestess, things were expected of you. Leadership was expected of you. Responsibilities, things you're going to do that would be exceptional. And not just exceptional for yourself, but exceptional for the community. We've lost a lot of that these days. We move to neighborhoods where we don't know anybody. You probably don't know the people behind you, the people on the side. They don't want to know you. You don't want to know them. It's very lonely. But in those days, all you had was each other. And when you were snowed in for 3 or 4 months, you really knew each other. So the opportunity to show that you have compassion, that you have humility, and you have the awareness to fix things was considered wonderfully opportune and wonderfully honorable. We don't have much of that these days. People think they have to prove themselves in wartime, and that's not necessarily the case. The other thing is you don't want to mistake her for Esther. In the Bible, Esther actually refers to an ancient pre-Aramaic goddess named Ishtar and Astarte. Now, many of you who have been in metaphysics for a long time remember the Star Society or the Astarte, Astarte Society. Esther, in Hebrew means star. It means the myrtle tree whose flowers are 5-pointed and they look like stars. And she was the one who replaced the ancient goddesses. So if you look at the book of Esther, don't get confused. I'm trying to cover all my points here. How are we doing on time? Okay, because I want to devote the last few minutes to Gracie's Kitty Corner. They considered festivals. There were all kinds of festivals throughout the spring. Now, if you're familiar with the Celtic concepts, February 1st and 2nd was considered the Feast of the Dewdrop and the birthing of the first lambs. And oh my gosh, we've survived November, we've survived December, we've survived January. February and March are the last 2 worst months. Maybe we'll survive that. And we've got to keep our little lambs warm. And we've got to make the final selection of the seeds. And we've got to really pay attention to our resources. And no, it's not your time yet. I'm not starting Gracie's Corner for another couple of minutes. You know what W.C. Fields said? Never work with animals or children. She was up here last night. I set the table up. She investigated the bunny. She investigated the angel. I didn't put the orchid out. I'm not that dumb. So then we had February 1st and 2nd was the dewdrop. Then we had the equinox, which is equal day, equal night, which we also had last week. And they had the festival of Isotere, which was the spring goddess. And then they had the festival of Beltane, which is May 1st. And that was a marriage selection, but it also was where the fathers and the mothers would go look at the potential suitors' farms and see how well they were doing. Oh, this clown doesn't know how to grow anything. I'm not letting my daughter marry this clown. She'll starve to death. And I'm not supporting them. So the opportunity to review the potential suitor because you declared your love for each other and your willingness to spend a year together as a tryout marriage so that there wouldn't be any kind of divorce or scandal. And you could break up at any particular time. It didn't have to be the full year. If you wanted to kill each other, then the idea was to split at that time and make the announcement. You made the pronouncement on May 1st that you wanted to be together. And then you made the announcement to the community during the year that this was not going to work out. And then you made the official announcement to everyone, because very often different tribes from the entire county or province would come together for the Feast of Beltane. So the life or death situation is very present in all people who understand that we live by seasons. Now, if you're down here in Florida, you understand that there are only 2 seasons, cold and hot. Today happens to be a magnificent day, which is why my hair is not frizzing. This will happen maybe twice a year. So it's an opportunity to gather yourself together, figure out why you're still here on the planet, What is your mission? Are you going to give birth? Are you going to be a father of children? Or are you, say, an uncle who doesn't really want to get married but loves his sister's or brother's children and wants to be like an extra caretaker, sort of like a wolf pack? You know, in a wolf pack, you have the alpha male and female, and they're the only ones who are allowed to mate. But you have aunts and uncles, and those would be the brothers and sisters of the alpha male and female. And they would be taking care of the babies when they're born, so that mommy and daddy can go out and hunt, bring the food back, and aunts and uncles would be there to protect the babies from invaders, maybe cougars, maybe bears, maybe badgers, maybe wolverines. Oh, that's quite a nasty little creature, by the way, a wolverine. And so thinking about how humans relate to certain animal kingdoms is quite fascinating. So if you are in springtime, and we're in springtime here, I have outside my door a bunch of orchids. Don't throw your orchids away. Put them in one of those wooden frames that you get from the big box stores. Hang them from a tree that has mostly shade and water them. Just put the hose on them and you're going to find that, what's that? That's a new stem. Those are buds. Put them in a place where the squirrels aren't going to slam down on them and play and swing in the, oh, one of the worst days. I opened the door and there were squirrels swinging on my basket, snapping off the little buds. So now when anything starts to bud, I bring it in under the eaves of my front door. I'm sure they were having a great time. I, on the other hand, was not having a great time. Okay, so we covered the fertility, we covered esoteric, we covered ostera. You can do further research. I think it's fascinating to know where these different situations come from. We put Easter eggs in an Easter basket. We put Easter eggs all around and let the kids chase them. We have Easter bunnies. We actually have real bunnies here. I wasn't going to try to catch one of them and bring that little sucker in, but I'd like him to stop eating my ground cover jasmine. And we have all of my rose bushes have blooms on them, and that's a very exciting time for me. All right, now we are going to talk about Princess Gracious Gracie's Kitty Corner, the feline rabies situation. Now, I called my vet clinic yesterday because in this article, which is from Catnip, which is a veterinary magazine, it's talking about how many more animals are coming up with rabies because people are not vaccinating their cats and dogs. And so therefore, if the cat or dog is outside and they nip something, a raccoon, a possum, that is now through the saliva communicated to the other animal. The other animal is going to get aggressive and attack. So feline rabies is becoming a gigantic threat. The reason I called the vet clinic is because I wanted to see, because it said here animals, warm-blooded animals. But Toby, one of the fabulous techs over there who has every kind of animal at home, from tortoises to cats to dogs to parrots, and I don't know what else they have, bunnies, so I think she's got some bunnies, said no, it's not warm-blooded animals, it's warm-blooded mammals, which is redundant because all mammals are warm-blooded. In fact, they know how many of the dinosaurs that they all thought were egg-bearing were warm-blooded. Interesting. So please, I am begging you, go to your vet and get the 3-year rabies vaccination. 3 years is long enough, and your vet can run a titer, which is a test of the blood to see how much of the rabies vaccine is still left in the blood and active to protect your pet, cats and dogs. And this is even if you have an indoor cat. My cats have all been indoor cats. But how many people have had a bat fly in the house? You're holding the door open, maybe they're bringing in a mattress, they're bringing another piece of furniture, somebody's bringing in groceries, and the next thing you know, something whizzes by your head and you think, did I see something? Yeah. And then later on that night, you see something flying over your head and it's a bat. If that bat's carrying rabies, it probably has bitten your cat or your dog. So you want to make sure that your cat and dog are vaccinated against rabies. It is spreading to all kinds of creatures across the United States and across the planet. across the planet is particularly terrifying because people in other countries don't bother vaccinating. And in our next segment, we're going to be talking about vaccinating your dogs and cats when you live in other countries, because there are wild animals that are becoming extinct because they haven't had rabies and they haven't had distemper shots. So if you were going to have a pet, and I know I've said this 1,000 times, but I cannot say it enough because people still aren't listening. Oh, I don't have the money for a shot right now. Well, then don't get a cat. Don't get a dog. That's Gracie in her playhouse. Don't get an animal if you are not going to give it regular vet checkups every 6 months, including a dental. Yes, dental. There was a show, do I have time to tell? There was a show, I won't mention the name, but on Nat Geo Wild, a vet out in the Midwest with an old guy who came in with this cat who had stopped eating. And the first thing they noticed was this ghastly, deadly breath coming off this cat. The cat wouldn't let her open the mouth till she got her in the back, and they slightly sedated her. She opened the mouth. Not only were the cat's teeth rotted, and most of them gone Gracie, but there was a hole in the roof of the cat's mouth where the infection from the gums had spread into the roof of the mouth. That cat could have died, and probably did. They didn't do a follow-up on that cat because food was getting up into the nasal passages and up into the brain. The brain is all through our head, people. So what happens to your ears or your nose or your mouth happens to your brain. So also, which brings me to something else. Somebody asked me the other day about her daughter getting a ring through her nose. I said, you know, I always used to say that if you get holes in your ears, the next thing will be a ring through your nose, and look what's happened. No. And ask an ear, nose, and throat specialist. You have mucus there all the time. You breathe in germs. Please do not get a nose ring. No nose rings. It's too close. Okay. Metaphysically speaking, I'm Linda Bennett. If you want an appointment, call 727-736-4567 for a phone appointment. Otherwise, you can catch us on the World Wide Web or any of the Facebook pages, etc. at metaspeak.com. And remember, if you will just open up your hearts and minds to God's universal truth, you're going to know that God and the angels are always with you. Stay with us. Namaste.